History is often written on the intersection of truth and legend, and although the work of a historian is to separate the legends from the reality, there is value in understanding what was the origin of certain myths and how and why they became so widespread. One such legend is the story of Saint Maurice and the Theban Legion, which played a huge role in the early history of Christianity in the Roman Empire. But what was the legend, and what is the truth surrounding it? Today's video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Raid has millions of players and dozens of tough bosses, but its heart and soul are the gorgeous champions. They've just introduced the new playable faction, Shadowkin, shrouded in mystery and hailing from the eastern continent. It's believed that they've been under the brutal heel of the demon spawn for the last several hundred years. They've overthrown the demons and revealed themselves to the other factions. This faction is just getting started. Come and learn what they're about. What we love about Raid are the awesome champions. Just take a look at Seshi from the Shadowkin. Raid has just hit its 2-year anniversary, and its schedule is jam-packed with insane anniversary events and tournaments with big prizes. Get involved in the very first ever clan vs clan tournament. On top of that, they've got some huge updates coming later in the month, including a new Doom Tower rotation with 2 tough new bosses. If you want to get a huge head start in Raid, all you have to do is hit the link in the description or scan our QR code, and you'll get your free epic champion, Jotun, 100,000 silver, 50 gems, and 3 ancient shards. All this treasure will be waiting for you here. Religious strife plagued the Roman Empire of the 3rd century AD. Nearly 3 centuries have passed since the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth, and his followers grew throughout the Roman world. Since the beginning of the Republic in 509 BC, the majority of Romans had been pagan, worshipping a pantheon of many gods. Christianity first appeared as an offshoot of Judaism. For centuries, Jews lived under Roman rule, but this new minority sect of monotheists posed a unique challenge for the polytheistic majority. Ceremonial sacrifices were a state affair. Privately, Romans were largely free to worship any gods. Household shrines to countless deities filled the homes of Romans on all shores of the Mediterranean. Demonstrating devotion to the Roman state, however, was a mandatory display of citizenship. For most Roman pagans, participating in the performance of public sacrifices was a service to the state. These civic rituals ensured that good fortune would favor the empire and its people. As direct beneficiaries of the empire's prosperity, all citizens were expected to partake in these rites. But many Roman Christians believed that sacrificing to gods of the Roman pantheon would be to directly betray their God of Abraham. Some felt this so strongly that they would not sacrifice, and were occasionally put to death for their refusal. Though less numerous than some hagiographies claim, these Christian martyrs became irrepressibly famous. Roman culture had a long tradition of exempla. These stories illustrated moral imperatives, their heroes dying theatrical deaths in the name of Roman virtues. When the tales of Christian martyrdoms began, the populace was primed to receive and relay these newest exempla. Though they were under the rule of Rome's pagan co-emperors Diocletian and Maximian, Christians were acutely aware of their growing presence within the empire. In 286, the junior emperor Maximian campaigned to Gaul to quash the Begadae revolt. These peasant insurgents rebelled against the empire's taxation and abuse of their agricultural resources, but suffered a swift, brutal defeat by Maximian and his legionnaires. The legend of the Theban Legion tells of at least 6,000 men from the Egyptian city of Thebes, who after subjugation to the horror of 2 decimations were martyred at Agornum in the Western Alps under Maximian. The legion was said to be composed exclusively of Christians, summoned to Gaul to aid in the emperor's military campaign. According to the story, the Theban Legion refused to sacrifice to the emperor or to the gods, or to harm fellow Christian Gauls. For its defiance, the legion received the ultimate Roman military punishment, decimation. Every 10th man was killed, each of his 9 comrades escaping death by a hair. The legion's principal officer, the Primicerius, beseeched his subordinates not to lose their faith. This officer is known to history as Saint Maurice. The legionnaires stood with their commander and suffered a second decimation. But even this most extreme demonstration of imperial judgment was not enough to make the surviving men abandon their religion. The remaining soldiers were all executed, joining their fallen fellows as martyrs of the faith, and achieving fame throughout Christendom. The story of the Theban Legion is unlikely, and most modern scholars agree that it is fictitious or at least egregiously exaggerated. The legion's summons to Gaul is dubious. While it is not impossible that an Egyptian legion would have been part of Maximian's company, it would have been more sensible to enlist troops already stationed on the continent. There is little certainty on the number of soldiers that served in the legion. Christian sources claim the number to be 6,000 or 6,666, but a Roman legion of the time period that exceeded 5,500 men-at-arms is improbable. Though there was a noteworthy Christian presence throughout North Africa, it would have been highly irregular for every member of the Theban Legion to be a Christian in a primarily polytheistic ancient world. In the only Latin novel that survives in its entirety, The Metamorphoses of Apuleius, the Roman protagonist is initiated into a mystery cult to serve the Egyptian goddess Isis and her husband Osiris. Many Romans worshipped Egyptian gods as well as their own. Most suspect of all, Christian traditions claim that the legion was subjected to 2 decimations before being wiped out entirely. The punishment of decimation was rarely carried out by the Roman military. A legion might be sentenced to such a fate twice during its entire existence. There are no other known cases of double decimation. Though decimation was occasionally performed, the obedience instilled by this tactic came at a steep price for the empire. To execute so many trained fighting men was an extravagant expenditure of resources and manpower. A commander ordering every legionnaire to be slaughtered is beyond overzealous, and would have branded him as a madman. It is unlikely that either Maximian or Diocletian, both soldiers themselves, could have maintained leadership of such a military-centric empire with reputations for eliminating entire legions. Even during the 17th century, scholars were skeptical of the legion's existence. The prominent French intellectual Voltaire dismissed the idea of the Theban Legion, and a historical dissertation by John de Bourdieu, published in 1696, attacked the legend's source. Traditionally, the story of the legion is attributed to a letter written by Saint Eucherius, Archbishop of Lyon. De Bourdieu argued that Saint Eucherius was not the true author of this supposed letter. The author mentions the Saint King Sigismund of Burgundy, who built a monastery in honor of the Theban martyrs at Orgnum. By the time Saint Sigismund had built the monastery and was martyred himself, Saint Eucherius was already dead. Therefore, Saint Eucherius cannot be the author of the letter off which the entire legend is based. The Theban Legion's origin source appears to be a falsehood. Still, the concept of a North African military presence in the Alps is not without precedent. One of the most dramatic and celebrated military achievements of antiquity did indeed involve North African troops in the Alps. Hannibal Barca, the terror of Rome, marched war elephants and his Carthaginian army through the mountains to make a direct assault on the Roman Republic during the Second Punic War in 218 BC. Although the story of the Theban Legion is anachronistic, it is important to consider the influence of North African history and culture on the Roman world. Before the land that would eventually become Rome was even a blip on the map of the ancient world, Egypt was a magnificent and powerful civilization. Egyptian sculptural techniques and their love of monumental architecture were adopted and improved by the Greeks, who in turn were envied and emulated by the Romans. Since Cleopatra and Mark Antony lost the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, Egypt had served as the breadbasket of Rome. The Emperor Septimius Severus ruled from AD 193 to 211, hailing from Leptis Magna in modern Libya. Under Severus, The empire fully secured Africa as the agricultural provider for Rome. The tastes and fashions of North Africa were prevalent in Roman society. Many Roman houses in the capital and resort towns like Pompeii were decorated with Egyptian motifs, and entire obelisks, shipped all the way from Egypt, were erected around the empire. By late antiquity, Alexandria was an intellectual hub. Philosophers, scientists, astronomers, and mathematicians flocked to the Egyptian port city. Alexandria boasted a cosmopolitan blend of Egyptian, Greek, and later Coptic Christian cultures. But perhaps most thrillingly of all, North African presence was felt in the infamous Roman blood sports of the arena. The ritual slaughter of animals was a political aspect of the games that became so prominent that tunnels for their transport into the Flavian amphitheatre, known to us as the Colosseum, still exist today. Providing exotic African animals for these spectacles made a resounding declaration of the game sponsor's generosity. Legionnaires required specific training to capture and carry live beasts all the way across the Mediterranean and into the landlocked capital. Romans are known to have brought lions, elephants, crocodiles, hyenas, hippopotamuses, and ostriches to the arena. To illustrate his triumph in Egypt, Julius Caesar returned to Rome in 46 BC with a menagerie of African animals, including a giraffe. The cost of these theatrical endeavors in the logistics of supplying food, water, transportation, and manpower are incalculable. Displaying the wonders of Africa as a statement of power and wealth was staggering. Beyond simply slaughtering the animals in ritual sacrifice, African animals were famously used as a form of entertainment and a method of execution. Venatores were fighting men who participated voluntarily in beast hunts for glory or money. But the bestiarii were enemies of the state, condemned to death by combat or exposure to wild animals, as a form of capital punishment. One of the first instances of this method of execution was used by Scipio Aemilianus after his conquest of Carthage in 146 BC during the Third Punic War. It was originally practiced exclusively on non-Roman military deserters or defectors, and was possibly inspired by the Carthaginians' own use of this tactic. Death by beast became inexorably entwined with the persecution of Christians in the 1st century AD. The Roman historian Tacitus claims that Emperor Nero exposed Christians to wild dogs after blaming them for the fire of Rome in 64 AD, and the Christian writer Tertullian made the first mention of Christians being killed by lions in the 2nd century. The legend of the Theban Legion draws on several striking and impressive truths. It plays on the shock value of decimation, co-opting the Romans' occasional genuine usage of that punishment as proof of their remorseless severity. It borrows the resplendence of Hannibal's steadfast North African troops crossing the Alps, immortalized in art, literature, music, and drama throughout history. This event gained fame in its own day, and was certainly known during the time the Theban Legion was supposedly martyred, circa 286–87. And though there were not nearly so many executions by wild beasts as hagiographies would insist, some Christians were indeed put to death in grisly and harrowing ways for their refusal to partake in state-mandated sacrifices. The Theban Legion, however inaccurate, continues to be celebrated. The Legion's feast day is September 22nd, and Saint Maurice is the patron saint of prominent European royal houses such as the Merovingians, Carolingians, Burgundians, Lombards, House of Savoy, and the Pope's Swiss Guards. He is portrayed in art as a sub-Saharan African soldier, and was first depicted as dark-skinned in the 12th century. These representations predate the racial tensions and inequalities that our modern world contends with today, and is a testament to the true diversity of the Roman world. More videos on the history of Rome are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see the next video in the series. Please consider liking, commenting, and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.